Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a literal paradigm shift in how we understand the human brain. We're talking about the Brain Kinematics Model, or BKM. For decades, neuroscience and psychiatry have relied on a very specific way of defining mental health. But what if the map we've been using is just totally outdated? What if it's time to completely remap psychiatry from the ground up? Start by asking yourself this. What if a psychiatric diagnosis is just a convenient label and not actually the whole truth? When we hear a word like depression or anxiety, we usually think of it as a fixed, rigid thing, right? You either have it or you don't. But human brains are dynamic, evolving, constantly moving systems. So sticking a static label on a shifting landscape, it might literally be holding us back from truly understanding what's going on inside our heads. Section 1. The problem with labels. Rethinking diagnosis. Think about how a doctor assesses your cardiovascular health. They don't just take one single blood pressure reading and say, okay, well, you have heart disease. No way. They look at a whole bunch of physiological measures, right? Cholesterol, heart rate variability, EKG patterns, stress tests. It's treated as a complex, dynamic system. But then think about how we often treat mental health. We're diagnosing incredibly complex brain states with a static checklist of symptoms. It's almost like a personality quiz in a magazine. It just completely misses the bigger picture. So we absolutely have to move away from drawing static borders on a map. We need to stop using categorical symptom labels where you're just placed in this box or that box. The BKM way, which we're pulling directly from our source text, completely reimagines this whole process. It views the brain through the lens of a multidimensional, dynamic organizational signature. Instead of asking, what category are you in, BKM asks something entirely different. How is your brain organizing itself right now? And how is that organization changing over time? It's tracking a shifting landscape, not a fixed border. Section 2. Rethinking medications beyond chemical fixes. Now, if our understanding of diagnosis changes, well, our understanding of treatment has to change too, for sure. Historically, we've viewed drugs as acting on very specific centers in the brain. For example, SSRIs target the Raphi nuclei to block serotonin reuptake. Antipsychotics target the mesolimbic pathway to regulate dopamine. And benzodiazepines target the amygdala to enhance GABA. Basically, we've treated these as chemical fixes for isolated, broken parts. Like you have a serotonin deficiency, so we just give you a serotonin booster. But modern neuroscience is showing us that psychiatric medications rarely act on just a single center. According to the Brain Kinematics Model, medications do not create thoughts or fix isolated centers. Instead, they modify the regulatory conditions and the overall network strain under which neural synchronization happens. Think of it kind of like tuning an orchestra. The medication isn't actually playing the music, it's just adjusting the acoustic environment so all the instruments can synchronize better. Benzodiazepines, for instance, reduce overall network excitability, which damps down the excessive strain amplification that we call anxiety, so it's really a whole network shift. Section 3. 3 dimensions of deviations. So rather than asking, what disease does this person have, BKM asks 3 completely different questions to map out a 3-dimensional space of deviation. Step 1 is distance. How far has the system departed from its optimal, healthy organizational state? Step 2 is temporal persistence. Basically, how long has the system remained away from its healthy state? Is it acute or is it chronic? And step 3 is organizational consolidation. To what degree has this altered state become self-maintaining? This totally turns diagnosis from a static labeling issue into a dynamic organizational problem. Now, that third dimension, consolidation, is an abstract mathematical concept in the model, but it is absolutely crucial. Think of it this way. Consolidation is like a rut in a dirt road. A small deviation that happens just once, not a big deal. But if you drive over that exact same off-path over and over again, you carve a really deep rut. And the deeper the rut, the harder it is to steer the system out of it, even if the actual distance from the main road isn't that far. That is exactly what happens in the brain. A state becomes stabilized or fixated, and it literally loses its plasticity. Let's put this into perspective. Picture 2 different theoretical patients who both technically satisfy current criteria for depression. Under the old system, they get the exact same label. But let's say patient A has a large deviation, but it's only been happening for 3 weeks, and it has low consolidation. Basically, they aren't stuck in a deep rut yet. Their probability of recovery is really high. Now consider patient B. They have a smaller, moderate deviation, but it's been going on for 20 years. The consolidation is very high. Recovery for patient B will be vastly more difficult. BKM actually captures this massive difference in dynamics that a simple static label just completely misses. Section 4. Mapping your brain's trajectory. Okay, so how do we actually apply this topographical approach? Well, it starts by redefining what healthy actually means. We have to replace the idea of a single fixed point with what's called a nominal homeostatic corridor. See, a healthy brain does not sit still at one stationary point. It is constantly moving based on your age, whether you're awake or asleep, your emotional state, and your cognitive effort. The healthy baseline is a dynamic manifold. It's a corridor of expected trajectories, much like a traveler who is constantly navigating a shifting landscape. When a brain wanders outside of this healthy corridor, BKM gives us an incredibly nuanced way to measure that deviation using 5 specific properties. First, positional deviation asks, where are you relative to the healthy corridor? Second, directional asks what specific functional dimensions, like emotional amplification or executive underregulation, are affected. Third, dynamic measures exactly how fast things are changing. Fourth, topological looks at whether the actual geometry of your brain's state space has changed, like if abnormal attractors are appearing. And finally, consolidation asks how strongly this altered state is maintaining itself. The source material puts this beautifully, culminating in a really profound reframing of mental illness. It says, disease is not simply a displacement away from equilibrium, but a persistent departure from this evolving organizational manifold. So what does this all mean? It means it's not about having a single broken part, it's about getting stuck on the wrong trajectory and losing the ability to navigate back to your healthy path. Section 5. The future of psychiatry. To map a brain's organizational state space in real time, BKM proposes a multi-layered assessment. We simply can't rely on just asking a patient how they feel once a month anymore. The future involves your smartphone, tracking behavioral dynamics like reaction time and mood through experience sampling. It includes closely monitoring sleep and circadian rhythms to see how global state transitions are regulated. And of course, integrating brain imaging like EEG or fMRI to capture fast temporal and large-scale spatial organization. To actually make sense of all this data, BKM requires 2 different reference models. First, the population normative reference compares you to people like you with similar biological characteristics. This is great for finding long-standing unusual features. But equally important is the personal normative reference. This compares you to your own stable, healthy baseline. Because individual deviation patterns are highly unique, comparing you to your own historical corridor is really the only way to truly understand your specific trajectory. But here's the catch. A resting brain might look perfectly normal because it's working overtime to compensate for hidden vulnerabilities. So BKM introduces the concept of controlled perturbations. By introducing a gentle, carefully controlled challenge, and don't worry, we aren't asking you to defuse a bomb here, just maybe do a working memory task or attention switching, we can reveal the system's hidden instabilities. The true test here isn't just how well you perform on the task. Just like a cardiologist uses a treadmill stress test to see how your heart recovers after exertion, BKM uses cognitive and emotional perturbations to see how rapidly your brain returns to its homeostatic corridor after a challenge. Does it bounce right back? Does it overshoot? Or does it get trapped in an altered state? This reveals your brain's true resilience and plasticity. So bringing it all together, what actually replaces the outdated symptom checklist? It's called the Organizational Health Signature, or OHS. Instead of a doctor just handing you a static label, you are represented by this highly dynamic signature. It measures your instantaneous distance from health, the direction you've deviated, how long it's persisted, how deeply consolidated that rut is, and your capacity to recover. It is a precise, completely fluid description of the organization of your brain. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Imagine a world where mental health care treats the actual trajectory of your brain, rather than just masking the symptoms with a static label. A world where we track your unique pathway, understand exactly how deeply a pattern is consolidated, and measure your brain's elasticity and resilience. This explainer shows that the theoretical foundation for this is already here right now. The real question is, are we ready to remap the mind?